Thank you for being here, everyone. Welcome to the Geometric View, Season 1, Episode 9. We will be covering plasma morphologies and how they seamlessly flow between each other.
All right. Well, I'm going to get started here. It looks like we have Danny Kleinheinz. He is new today. We have Heather Stargazer, Will Dale, Brant Hinman, Sydney Twinning, and me, Buddy James, as your host for the Geometric View this evening. It's a different time of the day than normal, so it might be a little bit different energy of the show. But I wanted to have this show early and make sure to try to have this show this week because there's a lot of content that I want to cover just in general. And this is a show that I can check off and then move on, and all of their stuff all of the shows have been congruent in that they work together so far, so this should go right along with all the other shows. All right, so that said, I'm going to share my screen, and today on the Geometric View we are going to get into plasma morphologies, like galaxy morphologies, and also how plasma turns into life and living creatures. We're going to try to cover a broad range of subjects. So when I say plasma morphologies, I mean basically this. You can see it right here on Jupiter, what I'm talking about. So you can see cylindrical, helical, toroidal, vortical, spherical, conical, nodal, fractal, hexagonal types of different modalities of plasmas and streams and gases. So I wanted to jump into it because I noticed this as I was working on my work and in the Dougherty Set. I noticed that, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back quick enough here. Maybe. Sliding through some of the slides on our Facebook page. Feel free to join and check it out. So what really got me thinking about it was this picture. This is the Dougherty Set, and I realized, hey, if everything's connected, I can start drawing these snake-like windings and see these weird angles as rheometry or rheology, which would be the definition of rheology is a flow, specifically like a liquid flow. And rheometry refers to experimental techniques used to determine the flow properties of the material. So basically, we're studying flows here and how they pinch, release, and seamlessly turn into spheroids, helical winding paths, meandering rivers, conical sections, cylindrical sections, and the whole thing is filamental and nodal. Then we got this picture of Jupiter and the surface of Jupiter, and you can see these high velocity, hypersonic, multiple cyclonic vorticities or vortical movements here, and they're you can see the angles and the pinches and the pulls. And there's, I see these.
A horse barking?
What's that?
I see a horse. I see like a horse.
A horse. Yeah, this is a horse right here. A horse, of course.
That's of course.
So you got the helical, or the vortical. You got the cylindrical. You got the you really have all of them, and they're fractal recursions of themselves on the surface here of Jupiter. And I really wanted to get into trying to understand some of these dynamics, and that they're also happening in the sky and astronomical nebulas and stellar formations. So feel free, anybody, to talk whenever you want to mention anything. So this is just basically the beginning of it. All right. After that long lull, we'll go to this. See these? This is also the nesting kind of multi-vortex helical structures. Someone's got to put their mic on mute because I'm hearing a. Thank you. Yeah, it's just bad for the recording. Hearing a double like that. So you can see these are multiple helices intertwined, showing off the harmonics and how the harmonic scale moves in a Fibonacci-like type of structure, nested, very lifelike and sea creature-like. Now, I shared a couple of images here earlier in the chat, so we'll go to the chat and open up the conversation with this. This is mainly what I'm talking about here. Plasma dynamics. And how does energy come off of a system? What shape does it make? And how does it nest ultimately and then become another shape and or another structure?
Can we talk a little bit about the directional flow that you and I were talking about yesterday? Because somebody sent me a video about Magnus Force, which is like the velocity is going one way, the drag's going another way, the gravity is pulling it down in another
direction. And this, like this. Okay, yeah. So this is could be thought of like these are amplicones, or I'll show you what these cones really are. These cones are Gabriel's horn, and Gabriel's horn is also called Torricelli's trumpet. It is a geometric figure which has infinite surface area, but finite volume. The name refers to the Abrahamic tradition identifying the Archangel Gabriel as the angel who blows the horn to announce Judgment Day, associating the divine or infinite with the finite. The properties of this figure were first studied by Italian physicist and mathematician Evangelista Torricelli in the 17th century.
Does this only apply to this horn, or does it apply to all open structures like that?
Space-time structures would also work in the same type of dynamic. You can see here the painter's paradox and the throat of the horn and the reduction of the diameter here it talks about. But go ahead.
Are there places that this horn, you've noticed it in nature? Or, yeah.
Well, we're just about to talk about the hypersonic pinching that I've noticed inside the set, the picture that I was just showing here, which creates hypersonic spheres. And when either hypersonic spheres or just spheres, when nesting spheres or spherical structures like atmospheres create, it produces charge. And charge creates the dynamism inside of the subsequent layers of charge inside of the charge. And the horns are responsible for the distribution of the vortexture. The vortex is responsible for the distribution of the energy across the surface also of the sphere. So I want to extend it and possibly call it a Torricelli sphere or an infinity sphere. But
and these are embedded toroidal structures?
Just kind of learning about it myself, but they're all over inside here. And there's also two opposing spiral conic sections that I'm really interested in, as the life force and the death force, which produces entropy and negentropy further along out the center here, it starts to unfold. So these cones are actually, since the horn has a finite volume but an infinite surface area, there's an apparent paradox that the horn could be filled with a finite quantity of paint, and yet that paint would not be sufficient to coat the inner surface. So what it's saying is you could go on forever painting the outside, but fill it up technically with paint, with a finite amount of paint. And then the paradox goes on to say, because it's an apparent paradox, the paradox is resolved by realizing that the finite amount of an infinite surface area is simply needed to get thinner as it simply needs to get thinner at a fast enough rate, much like the series 1/2n gets smaller fast enough that its sum is finite. In the case where the horn is filled with the paint, the thinning is accomplished by the increasing reduction in diameter of the throat of the horn.
That's a familiar algorithm. 1/2n is in your Dougherty set.
Yes, I think the whole thing is 1/2n, right? 1/2r, and the diameter 1/2n.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I know that this is Torricelli's trumpet here. Okay. Not only here nested in the structure, but also nested in many other places. As in later episodes, we're going to get into how many times the Squatter Man appears inside the Dougherty set. And
you
other
mentioned
structures.
These horns or the sphere nesting being in the atmosphere. When you said that, did you mean by the poles, or does this also apply to particle physics? Where else have you seen this in nature in our world?
Great questions, Brighton. I think that's a little bit later in the episode, but okay. I'll touch on it now, or maybe we can get right into it. The structure of the auroras, and this brings us into the next topic that Heather said we should get on, because we are going to get right into this. And the humming of the auroras, how the earth resonates and sings to itself and pulls the creatures out acoustically out of the ground. Not even a gravity, an acoustic driven life force, and I call it sonotropism. And once we start talking about sonotropism, we'll start to see that living creatures and pine trees and the trees are literally, due to this bouncing, cascading effect of these whistlers and warblers and a bunch of other crazy names.
I'm sure these, with the 1/2n, would also, of these horn structures, would also apply to the inverse. Is it the inverse square law?
It's the same thing.
Photons would, the light that hits
the collapsing of the wave function, etc. I would think so.
It's doubled. It's kind of, if you scoop back 1 meter, the size of the square doubles, or if you scoop back 2 meters, it goes to 8, and that's how an interaction with photons and space.
That's why we see this when we see the photon in the X-ray. We see structures that are similar to this. And I presented that at the Russell conference as well, presentation that's about to come up. So this is my hypothesis, and I'm just dropping it like on every single episode. I don't even care if I'm writing it or not. This has to get out there, so I'm just bringing it to the world like this. And we'll get into how these morphologies of these plasma structures thinsulate, insulated, insular, and exular layers, multiple skins within skins, and how it's necessary to have a skin or a sheath or on the top of when you're brewing, what's that drink? Kombucha. There's that top. There's a ring or a cusp that forms, and fungus uses these rings and these cusps to form their structures off of. So I want to get into into the atmosphere, into stellar phenomena, how we, not only that it looks like these structures, but also why when I invert this and share this map, it looks like what we've been talking since day one, diatoms and the glass shell structures of diatoms and simple plankton that is so essential for all life on Earth. And it secretes from the glaciers. They come from the bottom of the glaciers. These structures and these glass shells fall slowly and form themselves at the bottom of glaciers and then go into the ocean. And
flowers, stems, water dynamics when you're spinning, water, mushrooms, even fire. I'm seeing it all in this structure. It applies to, sea sponges and how they grow, sea urchins and how they grow. They all need a basic structure to start off of, even Romanesco.
Right. Everything has to have a basic structure, and we're going to get into silica and silicon and cilia, our hair, and the combination of what glass has, why this glass house that we're in with all of these trees and plants that are pulling silica rich and silicon rich nutrients from the ground to build their large dead structures as antenna. I believe that I'm correct in quite a few directions here, leaning forward with regards to how these structures form. And first, how we're going to get there, I think, is if I pull up. This is something that I saw, and then I asked Heather to find, and Heather found it for us. She was so kind to find it. So we'll start here. I can't share it with the sound where everybody can hear it. So Brighton, you want to steal the show for a minute and share it with the sound so everybody could hear? I don't know how to do that yet, but I know you do. Let me share this.
Northern Lights.
Should I share the link to you, or do you know how to get there?
I can get to it.
All right. So I'm going to keep talking until he's ready to share his screen. So once you get to it, go ahead and just tell me to shut up.
I got it.
Okay. Did you steal the screen, or is it just
constantly bombarded by particles from the sun? When sunspots or a solar flare send enough of these particles toward the Earth's magnetic field, the skies at both poles light up with the aurora borealis and the aurora australis. The particles also create very low-frequency electromagnetic waves, creating a type of natural radio. It can be picked up around the globe with specially designed receivers. So every year around this time, sound recordist Steve McGreevy heads north, where the reception is best, and points his receiver at the sky.
There's just a whole litany of different natural radio sounds to record. Hisslers and growlers and howlers and tweaks, these clusters like a pack of dogs barking. And in the case of this morning, we're having these very soft, hissy whistlers, which are actually fairly rare.
It's 5:24 in the morning on Monday, the 22nd of June, 1998, at Watson Park, Belly River Campground, Southern Alberta, Canada. We've got these great hissy whistlers happening, and in the right channel we're hearing the beginnings of chorus.
That was a burst of static from something pretty close, a lightning storm. Oftentimes when I'm recording, you'll hear kind of a and maybe a second or two later you'll hear the electromagnetic pulse from the lightning bolt takes a round trip to the opposite hemisphere, and then it bounces back. And in making this long trip, the frequency components are spread out, so you get this downward falling tone, like a sigh or a hiss. These receivers are sensitive enough that a lightning storm could be happening 1,000 miles away and the static would still be strong. You can just hear all the snapping. Let me turn on this speaker amplifier. You just can imagine there is so much. Oh, in fact, we're hearing some nice noises now coming in. Okay, this is a very beautiful sounding event. This is called chorus. Particles from the sun are hitting Earth's magnetic field and generating these noises, probably several thousand miles out in space. Imagine a soap bubble with wind currents pushing against it. You can see it deform. Well, that's essentially what happens with Earth's magnetic field. So yeah, I've got these funky-looking triangular-shaped loops, 5 turns of about 350 feet of wire hanging up on the tree, picking up the beautiful sounds of Mother Earth. They're just vibrations of electrical and magnetic energy. And so essentially all these receivers do is pick up the Earth's radio waves and translate them directly to the same sound frequencies. And so the result is just beautiful and amazing. And it's been going on, well, for eons. And they first noticed it in England in about 1882. The British telegraph operators started hearing these strange whistling tones in their headphones. But it wasn't until the 1930s when some people started associating these with visible northern lights. As electronic equipment became more available to the average experimenter and hobbyist, amateurs started listening to this using fairly crude equipment, maybe a phonograph amplifier connected to a barbed wire fence in the middle of nowhere, and similar to what I did when I first heard this myself. When I discovered Earth makes its own radio waves, I was amazed because I'm a nature enthusiast anyway, always been interested in astronomy and science. I've got a long, quite checkered history with radio, beginning as a little kid playing with an AM pocket radio and tuning in distant stations at night. And I've done all sorts of crazy things, planting radio beacons in the middle of the deserts and bouncing signals off aircraft. And time check. There's a station in Colorado called WWV, which does nothing but transmit the time 24 hours a day on shortwave.
Okay, that's good, Brighton. So, wow.
I say you should let it go a little while longer because he'll talk about how it discovered it and.
Okay. Yeah, Brighton, let it go.
You can do this yourself.
1 June follow. Solar flux 102 and bold A index 16. Repeat solar flux.
But once an hour, WWV gives lets me know what's going on with the Earth's magnetic field, and they give what they call space weather, which is what's going on in the sun and between the sun and the Earth.
Solar activity was low. The geomagnetic field was quiet to minor storm. The forecast for the next 24 hours.
I'm aware that right now the Earth is in a magnetic storm, and it may be affecting power lines right now. It may be affecting satellites right now. Space weather, this invisible weather we can't really see or feel on Earth, but indeed it's going on out there. And it's wild, and it's stormy at times, and it's calm at other times. It's just like weather here on Earth.
Steve McCreary.
Well, at this very moment, I've got my headphones on. These whistlers are really coming in big streams now. There's just one whistler kind of merging into the other, all slowly descending in pitch. These are so great. Wow.
Steve McGreevy in Canada's Waterton Peace Park.
All right.
That was incredible.
Yes. Okay. I saw this the other day, and I knew exactly what was going on immediately after I saw it. I'm going to explain some stuff that I hear right off the bat that I'm sure we all hear. Frogs chirping, ice breaking, other things. What other things does that remind you of? Angels, choir, chorus. So I think that this is electrotropism, and this is from the auroras. I mean, I called it sonotropism because I think it's all sound ultimately, but it's also electrotropism, if that's not a word yet either. So we can look at this and we can say, okay, now look at these creatures. That's the sound of the auroras. These creatures are these whistlers and different auroras are inducing these shapes into existence. They are creating the sound layers necessary, the outer sound layers of plasma necessary to create the inner layers of the being and the form. So the field is created, the field aligned currents are shooting out, and form is created inside of the field aligned currents as exactly just that, form. Nested formations of cones, nested toroids, nested helices, nested I already said cones, cylinders. These can all, plasma seamlessly flows between these, but what's really cool is you start to hear them and put two and two together. And if you put these shapes, these basic shapes next to diatoms, they're pretty similar here. And I'll say my next hypothesis here is, okay, I'll just pull this up just for a reference. Stuff like this. That's the chorus. The chorus is singing these glass beings, these glass structures into, this is the basis of what formative causation is, similar to what formative causation is, what Rupert Sheldrake lays forth inside of his idea of the morphogenesis and morphogenetic fields and mind fields and memories. This is all inside of this video that we just watched. These are the angels out here. These are people, these are stuck in resonances and well, not necessarily stuck, because it's always changing. It's a flux field, just like we're always changing and dynamic. But a lot of people talk about dying creatures and creatures going out of existence. This could be the genesis of negentropy, which is the coming into existence of new creatures. If I go to the top of pine trees and apical dominance, then you'll see that I don't know if it's just because I might be a synesthete or have synesthesia, but I can see exactly that these sounds that are being made are the pine trees, the structure of the pine trees, the exact vortexture or architecture of the pine trees themselves, and the cones and the seeds that they produce. Their mimicry on all scales, cascading downward into form. And I would say the same thing is true for all of the plants that are hypersonically induced through these channels of whistlers. Where's my notes on this? Okay, here they are. Growlers, hisslers, chirps, chorus, whistlers, warblers. They wrap up into toroidal knots, and after so much cycles and cyclicity, along with the earth being alive and moving and always changing, this is part of the dynamic. Sound starts to create cavities that fill themselves and start to turn into living creatures. Now, if you look at what apical dominance is, okay, some of these are nice. Yeah, look at that. That's just the top point that peaks up towards the center shoot. So I think the sound is pulling these up too. I don't know if we caught inside the episode, but if you go in the forest, you can hear them. And Doc Stars, who was on episode 1 and 2 of the Geometric View, he says that this is right in his region or his area. And yeah, you can hear the auroras. So that's pretty neat.
Wasn't there a light on your presentation at the Walter Russell Museum? You showed how there was a light phenomena on the outside of like ships and the
Yes.
flagpoles that they have. What do I need to search to pull that up?
St. Elmo's fire.
Yeah, St. Elmo's fire. So this is a picture of Schauberger. I posted this earlier, and this is what I wrote here. Whistlers are an audible sound that the auroras make. It's a bouncing, undulating, longitudinal wave that bounces from the North Pole to the South Pole. To listen to the sound, watch the link below. I'm proposing a radical idea of sound pulling trees up in different fauna, creating them and shaping them. The architecture or vortexture of the trees, because we see here Schauberger pulls it like that, of the trees is literally the sound of the auroras. And then we have the pine cone, minimal energy, perfection, and a wavelet shape. What if you hold a pine cone, you understand that it's a wavelet, a nested wavelet.
I think it's important to note that they're radio frequency, because radio frequency is EMF that translates directly into sound.
Yes, we use this same ionosphere to bounce off all of our radio signals and frequencies. We use the ionosphere out here. That's the only reason we have a radio. It's the only reason radio works is because of these auroras, right? It traps it inside. And when we had a huge Carrington event, which is a huge like 5X class solar flare, and a bunch of the electronic boards and grids went out, the only way to communicate, what Heather was telling me, go ahead, tell them, Heather. The only way to communicate were through these channels of the auroras.
I think
is that what you were saying?
Well, I think that they were using them. It's basically during the Carrington event, there was such interference in our electrical sphere that it caught radio transmitters and telegraph lines on fire and things like this. So they were unable to use them. But during that time of high storm, they were able to transmit their messages using only the auroral currents. So
Yeah.
they were transferring information via the magnetic field lines of the Earth, and I think that people were doing that in ancient times as well.
Yes, and Heather has all sorts of evidence to back this up as far as different alphabets around the world, runic alphabets, and what they were actually explaining was the language of these. And if you want, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's interesting because they were called, the specific alphabet that I've been studying in regards to this is the Fuse, and they're the Druidic tree runes, and each one has a dendritic association that goes with it, much in the way that you're describing with the sounds. So there's also evidence to support in that what you're hypothesizing.
So I think that the sound is literally induces different creatures, and then stacking orders and arrangements and hierarchies are formed based off of these smaller scale bacterial and fungal relationships, and then the scales cascade on larger and larger scales, and then eventually you have humans, you have Michael McDuffie here, you have Birkeland current. This is a Birkeland current cross section of it. So this particular mushroom type of shape that keeps happening here, that's repeating on scales, is also very, very familiar to us. Ooh, what's that? Speaking of mushroom, did someone steal the screen?
Doesn't Brighton still have it?
Yeah, I've been.
I didn't know you had it.
Have you been using
I've
your
been
screen
surfing.
this whole time?
Yeah, I've been surfing.
Okay, I've also been surfing, trying to follow with what you've been saying.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to take it, go ahead. Otherwise, I can do it.
Yeah, please pass it
Yeah, go
back
ahead.
over, please. But that's funny that I went back and I'm like, fungus? Does someone have the screen? I figured that might have happened. Do I have to take it again?
I think you do. It's not letting me cancel it.
Got it. You guys got it? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we see your screen now.
Sweet. Did you guys see Jupiter and stuff? Okay, that was at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at the beginning. Okay, cool. All right. So this is what I was talking about here with Schauberger's tree vortex. And the sorry, I'm let me get back to the.
Is that the same species of trees, or is this talking about evolution of species? Is this talking about what in particular is Schauberger's tree about? Because these look like different species. How they're diagrammed here.
Spruce, fir, pine, birch, ash, beech, oak, mahogany.
Okay.
But I'm taking this image and transposing our imagination onto what I'm talking about.
Your horn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Torricelli's horn, Gabriel's horn.
And at some point, this vortexural outgrowth of the tree stops expanding, it doesn't. I'm noticing that the structure can only be like a horn, because at some point, if it started going back inwards, we don't see trees that look like bipyramids. It's not so much of a bi-horn. Which would be the inversion, looking at those horns in inversion of how they are in this spherical system, where the open parts would be facing each other. We're not noticing that in nature.
There is a toroid. There's a suck from the roots going up, and then a growth from the out going out.
Yeah.
So there is that, but you're right. There isn't the
inverse.
There isn't this necessarily that everybody's freaking out about in the shape that everybody's freaking out about. The star tetrahedron, the Merkabah, there's a million different Merkabahs to make, but we're right here on the flower of life, like way over here, and here's the Merkabah. There's so many different shapes. Really, it's limitless to the amount of different shapes and plasmoids that we can become. On our outer selves and our inner selves, we have our interior structure made of these tiny little bacteria and gut.
What is this an image of here?
Someone else posted it. It's in the chat.
This is from me. This is supposed to be like the development of a solar system from primordial to supernova. And it's from one of my favorite pages, which is science diagrams that look like shit posts, and it's just funny because the supernova turns into a star with the face, but it kind of shows like the theory of the primordial system, where the two sides are kind of morphing into one, and how their force on one another is interacting until they become this heavy disk phase, like this ravioli thing that we often also see. And keep in mind at all times too that the one, say this black dot, could be an empty space. If one is an object, it could be balanced by an empty space.
So I see Torricelli's law right here. Torricelli's trumpet.
Absolutely.
And we'll look into more vortical flows and see more Torricelli's trumpet, because Schauberger was really obsessed with this shape and different. Let's see, Schauberger's vortex.
It's kind of making me think too that like a deciduous tree and a conifer tree would be like the opposite shape.
Oh, that's what Schauberger funnel. So you look at that. Oh, that was it. Here we go. Okay. Oh, this is a video. I didn't want to do a video. Okay, images. This particular life force energy braid. So you see that the minimal energy configuration has it to a 2-force helical thread. But there's also counter space. So even though their main force might be this vortex, there's this counter space and this membrane or this fascia that people don't really talk about or mention, but there's also that counter space and counter rotation in between it.
Okay. What in nature are we looking at in particular? Is this seashells? Is this...
Well, look at it right here. It's in seashells, yep.
Okay.
This is a water. I think he did a bunch of different water filters, and
It's a staff of Poloniosis.
I'm not sure of that term.
It's the Greek, the caduceus, staff of healing, but with one snake, except for this would be with two. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, definitely involving the caduceus, and this is when we get into the helical aspect of the show. I mean, we've covered the toroidal aspect of the show. These being angels, and these being induced currents pulling up the pine trees, and the pine trees being able to be a mimicry of themselves. So pine trees are conics. So you get conical living life forms, if you want to go with this idea or this theory. You get all of these different life forms that are necessary for life. These are both induced currents, and almost this is silicon life base. They're glass. So this is the toroidal. Now we're getting into the helicoidal or helical nature of both water, living systems, dynamism and dynamics inside of living systems, the necessary, the necessity of wave reversals and pinches, and where entropy comes into the play. So this would be negentropic from here, and then it would be entropic from here on out. The death part of the vortex, the life part of the vortex. And you can see this is how riverbanks form, sand bends form, and the reason why meandering happens is because for a system to move anything, any type of information from one place to another, I guess, that we're seeing that there has to be that ebb and flow, or that perturbation that keeps things in flux. That's familiar. That is what's the guy Maxwell's charts of electromagnetism. That's a dipole. Common magnetism that we know, and we see the hyperboloids and the toroidal flows and of magnetism. So that covers magnetism a little bit right there. Got the biconical outflow of galaxies. And all light, these are living. So we're talking about living systems and dynamical living systems and how they nest and some sort of subsequent harmonies. Biconical. Images. So here's an image of the electromagnetic field, or at least a flux field around the two conic sections. You can see the way the arrows are moving. These are moving this way. These are moving this way.
This is plasma.
Well, if you look at galaxies, galaxies do this.
Okay.
There's biconical outflow of plasma that comes, and the plasma nests inside of another cone and another cone, like a tornado. And we have examples of this. This will get us towards more pictures. Fermi bubbles is what they're called.
Interesting. Danny just shared a link in the group chat that relates to this. I'm actually noticing a relation where, and it's about water.
See the figure 8 here too, though. That figure 8.
Yeah.
That figure 8.
Oh, yeah.
And that's space. But that's where really was the actions happening. Okay, I'll go to the chat here.
If you take a look at water structures when they're vibrated at certain frequencies, it's the bottom one, very bottom one. They start to generate a polygonal distribution of the water.
Yes.
And
yes, polygonal. Oh, okay. Yep.
Yes. And if you apply, if you look at this as though there are frequencies hitting it from the bottom or another pressure applied on the top in a field, it generates through here. It's like a torus almost.
It creates the diatoms.
Yeah, and the diatoms are applied forces to the top or bottom.
Yes. So they're acoustically induced, as we were speaking of. So this is more proof.
I'm just seeing that the plasma of our universe could be similar to this to water, or water similar to plasma.
Yes, and that's going to get us. These thoughts are going to get us into the echoic chambers of eternality, and inside of water, we heard the metamorphosis happens inside of frogs. I heard the chorus of frogs in there. Okay, inside of and this is mimicry, you know. Maybe the frogs hear it at certain times or whatever. Once it gets close enough to them to wake them up out of the ground, and then they start mimicking the sounds that they hear.
Maybe they feel it.
Maybe they feel it. You know, they are a huge indicator species, and with indicator species, we know they're sensitive. Trying to not swear, guys, as much. Fuck.
There's also something to think about where just the sound leaving the frog, I mean, and I don't know the exact biology, but just, I mean, we can think about our own mouths, that is a toroidal phenomenon. And so there would be similarities, you know, on every level in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're speaking in toroids, and our tongue is twisting it in knots. Everything is twisted. We're about as twisted as it gets, man. Everything is fucking tied up in knots, and that's why we need to get massages, and why our health is very important. And acoustic therapy and sound healing. Everything's calling me back to the sound. I did my first, one of my first types of sound healing. It was with sound bowls this last weekend. And we did this geometry of sound last week. So that was beautiful in the chorus and in the concordance with that. These are Chladni patterns. And when you turn it up past certain frequencies, they change rapidly, extremely rapidly. And our whole solar system does this too. Heather and I were talking about this years ago. Look how rapid it is. It's just going up slowly. It's going up slowly. The whole solar system, imagine the whole solar system being in this configuration. Listen, and this is what David Talbot and the Thunderbolts and Velikovsky says. Boom, planets move and shift. Everything shifts and changes harmonics. If it goes up or down, ooh, it bends, it shifts, boom, and then everything shifts into new configurations. Imagine what that does for the poles in the planet. And then I'm going to give the platform to Heather to talk about, are the poles really shifting right now?
Are they?
Exactly. Well, you have some indications in the auroras that they could be, right?
They could be. I mean, it's a thought, right?
Yeah.
That because maybe a year ago, we started noticing Steve you guys familiar with Steve? It's a like a single linear auroral jet that was a new type of aurora that nobody had ever seen before, and now we're starting to see more and more Steves. And like they called it this because they didn't know what it was basically. And then we started to see there he is. And then we started to see this picket fence alignment, which is kind of a bunch of like horizontal lines like this.
Cross hatching.
Consecutively, right. Well, but then they started to cross hatch. That was the next step.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just recently with those. There was the shelf aurora, which kind of looked like a dune aurora, they were calling them, where they look three-dimensional in form, almost like a sand dune, like they're coming after you. And then, in a very quick succession, we're talking about a year, these auroras have changed their shape, and now we're seeing them. You got shelves. Try dune. Yeah. But then now we're starting to see them in this cross hatching.
These?
That's a picket fence. That's more like a picket fence.
Okay.
And
this is Steve.
There's Steve.
These? No.
No, it would be called. Try the word dune. See if dune
shelf,
brings them off.
Dune.
Yeah, instead of shelf, try dune. So my thought is, yeah, this first one and the one right underneath of it are really good because you can actually see this three-dimensionality to it, kind of like coming at you like wall cloud or like a gigantic storm system coming your way.
Yeah.
And so just in the past maybe week or so, they've seen this phenomena with like the picket fence cross hatching it, which looks almost identical to the Ogden alphabet, to the OM alphabet. And my thought is that if the magnetic poles are changing, if there's a migration of them, then there's those picket fence ones. Aren't they crazy? We will begin to see different types of auroras because that is hitting our atmosphere at a different angle than it was previously. So if on my you don't have to go there if you don't want to, but for reference, if anybody wants to see it, on my Facebook, the Heathen Stargazers, I did put up a post that kind of explained it and showed some diagrams to visualize how it seems to be reacting, because there's a pattern that happens with the sun as we progress through the year. Yeah, it would probably just be N. Just replace the R with an N and you'll get
I was almost there. I'm so slow.
There it is. Yeah, it's really, really telling, I think, that about that the magnetic electromagnetic presence of our planet is shifting and changing. I think it's visually present in this. So I've got some really awesome people who like to participate in this site. So we get you might need to scroll down just a little bit more.
Here it is.
There it is.
Wow.
So check that out. If you want to open it up and you can look at the comparison for the Perrot column instability or column stabilities, Whistler wave propagation in different shapes, and the way that the light hits us at different times of year. Now look at that. I mean, look at that.
Yeah. And if you look at runes, where's a quick place I could type up runes?
What, the tree runes?
Yeah.
Just type in OGHAM.
Ogum trees?
Well, the Ogum trees would be the tree runes, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then this is that association.
This is my heritage.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about, this association, because each of these letters has a tree associated with it. They also have times of year, specific types of energies that go with them. And if you guys are interested, I did make a video about this. I'm in the process of writing a book about it, because I believe that these are
Oh my God.
like a diagram for understanding and also for projecting them, because we like the universe, right, humans, this alphabet is in Mexico, this alphabet is in Vermont, this alphabet is in Slovakia, this alphabet is all over the world near similarly built megalithic sites, and it's carved on stones. So I believe that they're radio markers.
Heather,
yeah,
what if the indicator for the tree is the type of storm that you see, and that's what glows, that's what tree glows based on the type of storm?
That's very interesting, because I think back in the day too, when we had a lot more electrical presence in our atmosphere, that this glow phenomena was visually present, and people could actually see it
and on the edges of things.
Yes,
yes. And you can see it nowadays. It's called St. Elmo's fire, and I'll show you right now.
Well, no, it's another phenomena that's actually a glow produced from the ionic exchange during high impact storms, and different, and you can actually see the layer change in the ground charge. Yep, it's the video. It's all.
You might have to search Saint, SAINT.
Yeah, it was a show.
Yeah,
image is a really good one. It shows a ship with the actual light structure on the edges of it.
Yeah. So when the ionosphere is closer, we were talking about, and I think Velikovsky talks about this phenomenon where things were glowing, the trees were glowing, everything was much more magical. That's why you could take a stick and ward off energies and move things like a magic. You took a willow stick, which has low charge, it's the lowest charge or highest charge, one of the two, or I don't know, doesn't keep a charge, so you can like move energies with it or something. Neil is better at explaining it, but ultimately, yeah, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the tree itself glowing, and I wish we knew the name of that you were talking about, Heather. Glowing trees. Should I type in glowing trees?
Well, it's an aurora. I'm trying to think of it too. I'm actually trying to look it up. Offhand,
because remember the
aurora
storm that affected the ground that happened a little bit ago? What happened?
It's glow discharge is what it is, right? We go from like when something has become electrically charged before the plasma concentrates into a place where it wants to discharge and becomes a stream. Before that, it is glow. So it's just all of those molecules getting excited.
Yes.
And then they stay where they are, but they become charged. And actually what's interesting about that too is that charge stays present, and it will like move in the wind and come back even after the producer has been removed. It's
now think about those creatures that we built on the edge of buildings, and those might have glown at night. Like, we knew what angels were, and we thought these were angels, and everything makes a lot more sense.
Why churches have huge crosses at the top of their, or towers have pinnacles? Yeah.
Yeah, and those creatures and different things that are here, maybe they were glowing at one point, and they knew what kind of rocks to use, what type of stone, and that's why they quarried it from so far away at different times.
Now, St. Elmo's fire occurs because you were saying that the solar winds press and push the plasma further to the Earth?
I think charge just builds up from it rocking up and down, so much static charge, right?
The boat?
Heather?
No, I thought you were saying that it was about in the Walter Russell Museum, you said it was that the plasma field, our atmosphere, has pressure come down on it.
I don't know, Heather, do you know? I'm not sure.
It collects. Okay, it collects. So when the charge of the atmosphere becomes different, then everything has to level out, right? Everything has to go back to zero. So as it's increasing in the atmosphere, it's increasing in the static, in the metal, or the high point of the boat. And once it's collected to where it can no longer maintain the charge that it's holding, it has to release it. It has to discharge ground. And that's when you get the St. Elmo's fire, when all of those have become excited to the point of stream. So it goes from glow to stream. And
you can be charged. People can be charged themselves, and their hair starts to stand up.
Absolutely.
A lot of people have events like that, and that's right. That's when you become streamers start coming off of you, and you become a positive charge, and then the lightning wants to hit you and complete the loop.
And that's why your hair stands up when you touch the socket with a knife. Or the toaster
and that's
with
why
a
you
knife.
should only ever touch it with one hand. You shouldn't, because it will stay in you.
This gets us into why our hair stands up too at different times. When we're our sixth sense, when our spidey senses. This is a good image of it. Spidey senses, look at that. And the glass house structures of things like silicon and wood and silica rich wood, things like that. It'd be good to look into what types of wood have. I'd like to see a chart of the silica rate in wood for type of wood structure.
Well, I would think it would be like a deciduous tree would have a higher silica output because it's a hardwood, and it's a slow grow hardwood, where like a conifer is like fast grow softwood. Mm-hmm. And then I would think, and then it would like go down brushing. So there's if you're gonna reclaim land, say you've torn down a building and you've got this vacant gravel, and so the first thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna get some little weeds, and you're gonna get some grasses, and those are gonna start to tear up the soil a little bit. So those are gonna have the least amount, and then you're gonna wind up getting some herbaceous annuals. And then once those, you'll start getting herbaceous perennials, then you'll get woody perennials, then you'll get shrubs, then you'll get conifers. Then finally, when the soil has been reclaimed back to a usable, permanent state, deciduous trees will begin to grow. And I would think that the silica uptake for each of those things would be like a gradation up, because they structurally need more to support them in that way, and it takes longer for them to form.
So hairs, our fingernails are an indicator of how healthy we are. How healthy we are. And all across the medical field, they'll tell you that. For whatever reason, our fingernails might be an amplifier of the protein structures that are built, the helical protein structures that are built. And hair follicles are helical too. So I want to make the correlation between the trees being the hair of the earth and how it feels and how it senses, the plants and stuff like that, and how the earth feels and senses. So in one way, taking plants and eating plants is more it might hurt the earth, might be more sensitive than some animals.
It's all antenna.
Yeah, it's all antenna.
This actually makes me think about perhaps why these kind of structures are innate. Geometric formations are innately found throughout nature, and we could say that it could be because God is geometric. We could say that as an absurd view, that even in writing a what's that called, a universe that's a virtual reality universe. If we're in a virtual reality universe, they say the way to compress the data would be to only look at the surface and write the algorithm for the surface of the... Yeah, so when you look at something, it becomes more complex, but that information doesn't exist unless you look at it. And so the chair that you look at, or you look at someone else and you're talking with them, whatever is the outside surface of your hand and body might be all that exists in that frame moment.
Well, when you said surface, it got me thinking back to the cone and the infinite cone of the Gabriel's horn.
Right.
That might be a data compression algorithm right there.
Well,
use
as much
Gabriel's
as
board.
evident, our universe has to compress data in some way, whether it's through see, if we want to do complex things such as speak, think, and breathe and act and all at the same time, information, whether it's through subatomics or whatnot, needs to have a way that it communicates and compresses that data to communicate efficiently to allow us to do these acts, or if we're plants to grow in these fashions.
Yes, and that's what we're ultimately talking about. We're talking about maximum design, efficiently designed creatures, and how they are most efficiently designed out of minimal energy derivation, basically.
Minimal energy, minimal surface area.
Maximum volume.
Wouldn't you think that like entropy applies for even like a geometric shape, so things would deduce themselves down to the minimal energy configuration, and then that would be the most efficient, especially if it's something that's replicating itself?
Well, of course.
Well,
I mean, if you look at atomic structures, it's all spherical or tetrahedral, and our understanding of physics is that these designs, these particle structures, have to be based on energy efficient models that are it's the morphology of honeycombs, morphology of structures. I don't know if you could pull up, buddy, a link on Wiki to hyperbolic uniform tiling. Again, hyperbolic uniform
I got it.
tiling. And when Einstein was saying space-time, hey, this is curved. This brings me to a concept of or an idea of how perhaps our yeah. So if you go to Wikipedia page,
tiling. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the honeycombs are work as well, because that's applying this in the third dimension, which of course particles would be doing. It's in the third dimension.
Henry Siegerman, he's been doing a lot of that. That's
yes,
what he was.
Yeah. Do you have he made a video where he's walking through one of these structures, and it's cubical, but because it's hyperbolic, he has to go through 5 rooms to do a full circle instead of 4, which would be square. 5 is, and that happens on hyperbolic surfaces.
He was presenting that at the in 2017 when I met him, and this guy's great. He's very animated, very smart. I love his work. And just Henry Siegerman. I'm sorry, I got distracted by looking at that and talking about Henry.
Let me pull up a video right now of Henry's thing. I have it. I'm gonna share the screen for just a quick second, because this is beautiful. A great example of what he's talking about. Now, this is one of his hyperbolic. I thought he had another. The one where he walked through it. Let me see.
Yeah, I walked through that one. That's what I was going to say. I put the headset on and walked through it when him and I forget her name. We're just working on the beginning of it.
Okay, well, I'll go into his videos and see if I can find it that way.
Ducky dice.
See.
Hey, Brighton, on the geometric view, you can also do the 360 virtual one that I did. That's also honeycombed in the same way.
Here it is.
Okay, that's on living duality?
No, it's actually in the geometric view.
geometric view in the...
That was a good demonstration, though. So you got to walk through it. But yeah, you can go to the other one. See, and you got to walk in 5 different directions to get back to where you were.
And this is cubic based. This is hyperbolic cubes. So it goes by a system of 4, which this is nonsense. It is mind-boggling to think how that would work. Okay, Brent, where do I need to go? Is it the
I think you have
call?
the geometric view there, buddy.
Okay.
On one of the pages, or it's on mine. They've done a proof in a number file that you can fit 5 cubes with origami, 90-degree angles in each one of the corners, and fit 5 cubes within a sphere, within a cube.
How long ago was this posted?
I think right before then.
Yep, keep going.
You ran by it earlier. There you go.
This?
Right here. Yeah, tell us about this. We were wondering.
Well, it would be a similar morphology. It's between the hexagonal honeycomb and the cubic honeycomb, and a blending between the two, because it's a fractal recursion of cubic honeycomb happening through, see, I was modeling out, well, the time crystal, which looks like a Merkaba. And so it's essentially an isometric view of a cube. And so it has a dimensional distortion. And then I took that and then I made a cubic honeycomb of that shape. And so I got some kind of hybrid between the hexagonal honeycomb and the cubic honeycomb in a pixelated form. And then I brought that into a kaleidoscopic tiling pattern, and then structured that all around a 360-degree sphere. And so this is a hyperbolic projection of a hexagonal honeycomb.
Talk about how dimensions, conscious dimensions, or like, whoa. No, I am that.
It reminds me of Magic Eye.
Yes.
The book.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, do you see a boat?
I see a 3D dragon, dude. It's coming right at me. Just got to cross your eyes a little bit. You'll see it too.
And I miss those, and everyone just staring at posters at the mall. Like,
Those were a mind trip. I made one before, and it was sort of accidental. And this was before I even was messing with Photoshop back when I was in middle school.
And buddy, this would fit the Dougherty set as well, because this is based on the Unity, and you could overlay the Dougherty set on here, and it would be if you did the Dougherty set in a 360-degree sphere, it would overlay like perfectly on top of this.
I could totally see it. And
it reminds me of rose mirrors. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can pull something up.
I think someone recently reached out to him for coming on the show here.
Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Brighton.
In albums, there should be videos here.
I mean, Dr. Dionysus.
Abyssal Dionysus, yeah. Okay. Okay, that's strange, but I should be able to find it any second now. Oh, here we are. That's exactly what I just did. Yeah, this isn't usually how it displays data. Well, this guy, incredible what he's done with his works. He's modeled he's created an atomic model and based it on the equilateral triangle tiling, which goes to state that everything might be.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Yeah, look at that, dude. This explains a lot. Just watching this. The stacking and tiling structures of, and you get the charge and charge separation. And it looks like they create the layering too. That we've been talking about on almost every single episode with Maxwell's.
When I sent you, I think I have the link to that if you want me to put it in group.
Please.
Okay, yeah.
This here is another one of his models, and it's by Kelvin Abraham, but it's a third-dimensional model, and it goes to show a let's see, helium, the second, so which is deuterium or deuterium, something like that. And you know, these are all, I believe, they're all regular tetrahedrons, all with equilateral triangles. It appears as if there's a icosahedral gap between how you would tile them on the top and bottom. I'm very fascinated by this concept. Now, what are these tetrahedrons? They are electrons, protons, and neutrons. What this goes to say is that for me, is that this universe is structurally Euclidean, pixelated, refined. We can explain things through a very basic system. Our universe is not complex. I mean, you look at the, okay, let's see. Or I'll just search up the, E8. And right down here, this is the Higgs boson structure, and it's the E8 quasi-crystal, and it's composed of platonic solids only, up to the 8th dimension, but platonic solids only. That's absurd to think that this kind of equilibrium dynamism is found in our subatomic universe.
I really like this, the E8 set, and the emergent properties of space-time and the qualities. We've talked about it quite extensively, and I love the model.
It reminds me of the sky mandala, this polytope-like structure, 120 cell. Reminds me of the sky mandala that Alex Gray talks about, or Terence McKenna, when they reference DMT journeys and DMT experiences. It's the entry into the experiential abnormal phenomena.
Okay. You want to pull it up? Maybe type it in, see if it'll come in.
Let's see. I know he on one of Terence's speeches, he either Terence or the sky mandala, he was going on and saying that it was a mandala, like a red lotus in the sky that blooms, and it's wavy and wiry and energy and just vibrant. And when you...
Is it reaching out to you with hands?
I believe it's above you.
Yeah.
It's something, but it's like you're looking straight into it.
Right, but it's reaching out to you with hands or breasts or something nutrient enriched.
And when you take the toke of the DMT, that is what begins. And then when you enter this mandala and you break through it, you go through it, or you transcend this. This is like a black hole just winding in. You transcend through the other end. you are in a whole another dimension
Here,
beyond this.
let me take the screen.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, these visions of
Brent, you have to take the screen if you're.
these.
I still have it.
Oh, here. Does Brant want to? Oh.
I mean,
Here.
buddy.
Oh, sorry.
Buddy, so, yeah. I just didn't want a repeat of what happened at the beginning of the show, where I took the screen when you meant to be showing stuff.
Well, hey, I'll see how you did. You know, I'm sure it's good. It's usually good.
Yeah.
Okay, sharing the screen. All right. So this is where we got into that loophole, and these tilations and these tessellations and these hyperdimensional. These are like Apollonian gaskets, Apollonian kissing. Basically,
Apollonian. What does Apollonian mean?
Well, this bubbling like structure and this fractal like growing outward growth, which is very similar to, I guess now we're getting into the dendritic or dendral nature of plasma.
I know MC Escher has diagrammed some of these structures, these hyperbolic tiling structures, with creatures like lizards or fish, where it's really wild to look at. But there's something to it, a concept, which is if you're finding this in nature, these forms, is the structure, is the form of that, is every fish or every lizard in the tiling structure
Creature stacking,
a conscious particular or particle? Or you could look at structures in nature. You find these structures growing in nature or in spatial dynamics between electromagnetism or particle physics,
or broccoli.
And it goes the question that if dimensions, if the wireframe that creates these very structures that we're looking at, the particles in for example, or the broccoli, for example, if that wireframe, every apex where the wireframe intersects is a conscious being, just like the fish or just like the lizards in MC Escher's tiling.
Yeah.
Are dimensions actually alive? Able to,
Right. Are they aware? Is
Yeah.
there cohesion or some sort of comprehension that this space is here and recognizes this space and allows it to be there?
That's what I was going to say, because the tiling is called, that MC Escher does, is called tessellation, and that's when the negative space and the positive space interact and create something between them. So the birds wouldn't exist without, with the positive birds wouldn't exist without those negative birds, and then there's like the Doppler effect gradation, where they form into
enveloping. Yeah, there's a very enveloped feeling about that, like they're nested and one and the same almost. You can't have one without the other. People feel the same about the light and dark, light and dark side, dark and evil sometimes too.
This is an underpinning actually in living duality, in this whole postulate, and it's important. Like, do you exist outside of everything else, or are you intrinsically a part of everything else?
Well, how could positive space exist without a contrasting negative space?
Exactly. Exactly.
Property that you're bringing up about how there'd be positive and negative space. I wanted to add a concept to that. In the second dimension, when studying topology, when you look at any map can be colored and tiled with 4 colors as the minimum amount of colors, without the sides of countries meeting. Doesn't matter if you have 7 countries all meeting at one apex, the sides would never be the same color so long as you had 4 different colors to tile the system with.
Or like this, none of the blue is touching any of the blue.
Yeah, or not.
This big blue isn't touching any of the other blue. And this red blue isn't touching any of the other red blues.
Yes, you have yellow, green, blue. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
That's a gorgeous example.
As you were talking, I was looking at this and I'm like, wow.
Keep that there for a second. That looks like the quarks, the images we have of quarks when you look at a particle, like when you look at a proton or a neutron. Those 3 circles remind me of the quarks. Perhaps there's a relation.
Yeah, this is Apollonian gasket.
But yeah, where these 4 different tilings would be, how you were saying, Heather, there has to be a negative and positive space in some prospects. Well, actually, I should say, in the second dimension, the maximum amount of colors necessary to do any tiling would be 4 colors. That's it. So we don't have to apply any more properties of existing conscious structures when we're talking about this second dimension. As for the third, that is a whole nother question, because you have all sorts of different tiling. And does the second dimension translate into the third dimension of how many colors or how many conscious entities there needs to be in the tessellation?
Right.
That's an awesome question. Just want to put, you just gonna hold that there for a second, about how many colors are needed in order to tessellate in higher dimensions. And another question, is that problem solvable?
Actually, our proof on the one for the second dimension is extremely long. It's like 57 pages long. And to do the proof, they had to go through, this absurd, loopholes of explaining every possible example. And so I'd say our proof is very hazy, and it might be possible for there to be a 5th color in the second dimensional tiling, but because our proof is very hazy. And this actually brings up, what's his name? The guy that said there's a paradox in any structure of mathematics that nothing can be proven.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
No, it's not that. It's something else. It's someone else. Anyhow. Well, I've pretty much explained the concept, but for when we raise higher in dimensions, that kind of proof is going to become absurdly complex. I do think that it's possible if we show every scenario, but when we rise dimensions, there's going to become an absolute, abundance of possibilities that we,
I believe that we can dimension shift at different times on our own, and when we expect miracles appear, and if we anticipate greatness will arrive and receive it. Much like, today's my lucky day, today's my lucky number, today's this, etc. Optimism and placebo effect neutralizing, and also not only neutralizing, but pulling plasma and energy out there and fishing for it, pulling it in.
Right. When we look at this actually brought me to a thought. where Brant, as you were saying, with your query as to
This could be the Elohim and the fallen angels, the auroras, and when they got super active and fell to the earth, when the earth spinned and changed its magnetic polarity. Because I'm sorry to change the train of thought.
I'm gonna finish this up real quick, buddy, and then get right back onto this. Yeah, is that good?
Yeah, hit.
Okay. So I'm realizing now, if we look at this problem of how many colors are necessary, or how many, because every color is a conscious entity of the, we can look at it as a conscious entity, as a bird, as a lizard in the tiling. How many colors are necessary in the second dimension, or the third dimension, or the fourth dimension? And this brings me to, again, uniform tilings, or particularly Euclidean, which are non-hyperbolic. So this disincludes the hyperbolic geometry we were looking at with Henry Sugarman and those other honeycombs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how many colors are necessary in this kind of tiling? No, that's hyperbolic. In uniform tiling, in the second dimension, there's only 3 regular tilings. Can you search up uniform tiling?
Tiling? What's T?
Tiling.
I would spell it wrong.
Images. Okay, so in the second dimension, there are only 3 tilings that use a singular polygon. And those would be the square tiling, if you imagine squares side by side by side, if you imagine equilateral triangles side by side by side, or if you imagine hexagons, again, side by side. And those are the only 3 tilings that use 1 polygon. Of course, there are other tilings, but using regular polygons, we can reduce the number quite efficiently. And so then the question becomes less of, is it only for all, countries? Let's say our universe is based on regular tilings. We might be able to have a more efficient proof that all regular tilings in the second dimension only need 3 colors. Because of course we're looking at, can you see that red and blue and yellow structure right there? The red, yellow, and blue. Down one. To the right. Bingo. Okay, that's rhombotrihexagonal tiling. This is a great example. Squares, equilateral triangles, and hexagons. This is using all 3. It's a regular tiling with 3 different kinds. If we could apply this concept of tiling, how many colors are necessary in tiling, or how many conscious agents are necessary in tiling, we might be able to reduce the amount of colors necessary in tiling when using regular tiling to three colors, and that would allow us to figure out in higher dimensions with honeycombs, which all have regular polygonal faces in each polyhedron. If the tiling would only need a certain amount of colors per dimension, how many conscious agents exist in the third dimension? How many conscious agents exist in the fourth dimension using regular honeycomb tiling? None of this is hyperbolic because that would change the whole dynamics of the question. But for example, this rhombotrihexagonal tiling, I've actually drafted some visuals on the third dimension of it, and it still uses only 3 colors. There's a third dimensional example, and here I'll throw it in the chat right now. I'm almost here at it. So if you could go to the chat, buddy. Okay. And let's see. It should be in there now.
Bottom one.
No, it's not a YouTube link. It's on Facebook. It's a link on the Geometric View Skype call.
All right.
And this is the same rhombotrihexagonal tiling with hexagons, squares, and equilateral triangles. But this, oh, this is a YouTube video.
I know. I'm just waiting for it to load.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. This is same rhombotrihexagonal tiling, equilateral triangles, squares, and hexagons when looking at it in an isometric projection. However, and it only uses 3 colors, same as in the image we were looking at before on Google, where it had 3 colors. And this is in the 3rd dimension, applying a cuboctahedron, half cube, and let's see, yeah, rhombic cuboctahedron. No, not rhombic cuboctahedron. Anyhow, there's another video in the link in the Skype group call. Well, that video right there was another example of conscious agents in dimensions in honeycombs. It's just another way to look at how many observers there needs to be in a honeycomb.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go to the Skype group call and click the bottom link, this is another one. This is the same rhombotrihexagonal tiling in the 3rd dimension, but it has a completely different tiling than the last one, and it's still 3rd dimensional. And the question is, how many conscious agents can exist in this this construct? And in this example, there's not just 3, there's actually 4, which are, purple, red, yellow, and orange. And this is using, and a whole nother tiling. You have
really sweet
truncated octahedrons, and that shape in there, the yellow, red, and orange shape, they're the same shape. It's an unnamed shape, so I'm calling it the hexagonal parallelohedron. But it's only composed of 2 polyhedra. That's it. The whole structure, and it's space filling. There's no gaps.
That's incredible. That could be stitched out into all sorts of different applications. I'm sure.
It's well, in nature, I mean, we can build technology based on this, absolutely.
Right.
But in nature, these structures are found in subatomic physics. That's where these kind of structures are evident.
Probably on larger scales too, because I'm seeing it on both.
Okay, do you have any names of larger structures that are cubic or icosahedral, or, I mean, perhaps, for example, Saturn might be icosahedral or dodecahedral in its vortexture? Mm-hmm. What examples are you seeing?
Well, I mean, you're right on the micro scale, but I'm thinking maybe the stitching together of the interweaving of the quasi-crystal of the Birkeland currents, the quasi-crystalline lattice structure of the...
Quasi-crystals are atomic, and then going even further, subatomic.
They don't have to be.
What do you mean?
Birkeland currents. Birkeland currents are large
quasi-crystals.
But aren't quasi-crystals pentagonal? Isn't that the
No, they
Isn't
don't
that-
always have
They
to
don't
be.
have
They
to
don't
be.
have to be. Okay, thank you. I
Yeah.
just was
And the EH structure is explaining something that's very similar, and what you are showing here is very similar. Is if you can tile the space in the plane, then that's a good way that information might be structured, and if you look at it when you start creating nanotubes out of these structures, and you create tubes and start turning tubes inside of tubes, then you start to see protein structures and protein binding, and that's what life is, and things like that. So I guess that's on the micro scale too. But yeah, you're talking about subatomic and atomic. So there's different scales, and then also Birkeland currents. So I mean, like I I went from our scale and our skin, so microscopic, to you're going subatomic, and then we went macro to the Birkeland currents, and they're all just basically different versions of layering and nesting of more compactification, more information equals more energy distribution. If there's more to quantify, then that means there's going to be more creatures and more interesting things that are going to be happening.
Do you think that things become far more chaotic at larger scales, or do you perceive that these Euclidean-like wireframes, these more structurally basic forms, are only applied to smaller?
No, I think they're on all sorts of different scales. And most of the time, I think very scale oriented. Like this, I'm thinking of is a Bessel function or a Birkeland current, and here's the solar system, and we're could be just it could be a cross section of it, and it could be just pulsating like this, and this could be the 11 years solar cycle maximum and minimum. Every 11 years it pulsates and does this rhythm.
Right, like we were talking about when we pulled up Danny's link, the water that was creating breaking into polygons when frequencies were applied to it. It was creating polyagonal forms. Those polygons, the apices or the spheres and the circles in this would be like the branches of the galaxy, because it has those, those winding, curving branches.
Brighton, could you steal the screen again? And
yeah, you're gonna have to.
I want to get our meditation back to the sounds of. If you could play the sounds of whales and the sounds of ice breaking. YouTube, there's hours long of ice breaking. Just kind of scroll through it and click it. It sounds just like the Birkeland currents. So this goes into the memory of water and goes into the structure of all day I've been thinking Morpheus. All day I've been thinking Morpheus and Orpheus. Orpheus. Where are you at?
I have the audio here. I have an ASMR.
Oh, you just have audio, but
breaking.
Okay, you just have audio, but I have the screen.
Yeah, you have the screen. You said you wanted sounds of ice breaking?
Yeah, sounds of ice breaking. Sounds like the Birkeland currents and whales. It sounds like whales.
Oh, it does. That's wild. And is this like, when you're walking on ice and you hear it crack, is this a slowed down version of that? Or is this...
No, this is ice cracking. This is like underground recordings or something in the water, on the ice, or in some manner, one or the other. So let's just listen, because I'll stop talking. Oh, no. If we could listen to more ice cracking, please.
This video I'm watching is also beautiful.
Yeah, actually.
Okay, yeah.
So the conifers is being pulled up. Now bright confusion. Frog sounds. Turn it down a little bit. Birthing currents.
My kids
Or
make me
J-Lo
cry
at the
sometimes.
J-Lo at the Super Bowl.
Go ahead and click the link in the group chat at the bottom.
Okay. Oh, nice.
Okay.
Turn it down a little bit. Okay, that's a little loud. All right. Now, if we could go to whales and dolphins, mainly whales.
And I just have to say this because I've been dying to say this, but are you guys Star Trek fans? Do you remember Star Trek 4, like back in the 80s? And they like the whole planet was gonna die, and it was because of this resonance factor. So they had to go back in time and save some humpback whales so that the humpback whales could sing them back into safety. It's my favorite of all the Star. And I think Star Trek is my favorite Star Trek.
Oh, that's so good. All right. Okay, so we'll go to a whale. Right, turn it down, find it there. Okay, so I think we're understanding, and I think at least I'm trying to get my point across. Sounds like a cow.
This video is gorgeous. Go ahead and click that. It's in the chat.
And I'll share all these in the links below for all the audience and the YouTubers watching. Okay, so
I'm setting it right where you're at. Yeah, that's insane.
Can you turn it down just a bit? They're communicating using the Birkeland currents, and they are the Birkeland currents. Their bodies and their form is made out of it.
It's such a shame that our Navy has done those sono scans of the bottom of the ocean, because from what I was reading online, it was saying that these whales end up beached because their eardrums or their sound and way of finding location is just buggered after having these sounds hit them.
That's horrible. That's like, that reminds me of like something that Aurora told me. She's like all these bugs, they're dying and things aren't good because of light pollution. And I'm like, light pollution? I never thought of light pollution hurting anything. But
What about 5G as well? Oh,
you know,
light pollution. You mean like us
just
having
ambient light, just ambient light. I'm like, that's not hurting anything, honey. I'm like, she's like, I'm sure it is. She's like, for some reason she's sure that it is, and I'm sure she's going to prove to me one way or another that it's hurting something.
Interesting. There's a lot of talk about 5G and cell phone towers and satellites, that these frequencies create radiation, which when projected out like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth will kill bees, will kill birds, will knock them right out of the sky. And, you know, I mean, there's some studies where you put Bluetooth next to a beehive and it just, you know, the beehive's dead. It breaks down because they communicate through vibrations or these frequencies produced from electromagnetic frequencies, you know, when they hit your heart or other organs in your body, or your neurons that are pulsing, you know, signals throughout to tell your hand to grip or not to grip. It's telling your heart to beat or not to beat, you know. When these frequencies hit you, high EMF frequencies, Wi-Fi, radio waves, any of this, it can stop your heart from beating. It can stop your organs from functioning properly. It is radiation. There's what's that called, when you get your breast scanned to make sure you don't have any cancer, and they're saying that, hey, this scanning creates radiation, and once you get the scan to make sure you don't have cancer, you know, 2-3 years down the track, because you did that scan, your breasts are going to start developing cancer.
Yep.
It's electromagnetic radiation that's harmful induction, and it's way beyond what is natural. We can say, oh yeah, doesn't the sun produce electromagnetic frequencies? But you know,
dude,
what we're producing from our phone is way higher.
Yeah, think about getting an X-ray. They're hiding behind a lead shield. They're putting a lead shield on just like maybe your balls, because they're like, oh well, here's his gonads, protect that, if they even give you some lead for your gonads, and then they take a shot and you're just standing there.
The same in dentistry. You go into the dentist and they
your face and your head. Yeah.
Well,
your brain's there.
These are recipes. Okay, they're frequency recipes that create specific three-dimensional shapes in their interaction with each other, and that's what happens when they use sound to attack, say, a tumor in your body. They're not just using one frequency wave, they're using a combination, a recipe to create specific wave shape, structure shape, right? So that is what why the 5G is such a big deal, and why it's so dangerous, because it's effectively creating a three-dimensional wave shape that is interfering with the two-dimensional shapes, we'll say, or the independent frequencies, which we rely on too, you know.
Are we? Is everyone here? I'm gonna pull up the Fourier series.
Fourier series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really good link on that. I can pull it up.
Okay, we're still on my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, buddy, if you would go real quick to the next few pictures over, just so you can see the gradation of the movement along the sphere with the pole shift, just because it's. See, this is how the sun crosses us.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next one is I put it over there's the OMs, but I put the image over the actual movement of the pole shift. These were just illustrations to illustrate what I'm talking about, because it's easier sometimes than to use words. Where is it? There should be another one.
Studying mathematics, but my gift is advanced.
Apologies.
Is it right here?
Yeah, they're in the comments. There should be 3 images in the comments that are. I just went there. Yeah, that's.
Excuse me.
There they are. So this one, the middle one is the pole shifting, the where it's going and where it is right now, and then these I layered them over top so you could see how it changes as the poles shift. Where it might be expected to be might not be in the same place where it used to be.
Okay, so that's
And yeah, and the one without that on it is just the pole shift.
okay.
Sorry, I just want to take the opportunity while you had it open to show that the interaction between our magnetic field and the exterior magnetic field is changing, and it's being illustrated in our atmosphere via light.
Yes, with the auroras, and honestly, I'm starting to think that the auroras are, I mean, honestly, they provide the lives and the dynamics of the Earth, and that's what I keep hammering pretty hard with the
Absolutely.
And I want to keep hammering it hard for sure. And a picture here that you had in here in this batch right above, right here, got me thinking about one of the images that I just created and how there's always this heterodyning plasma field.
Yeah, these are Whistler waves propagated from different. So one of them is just the wave interference, and then the one of them, the B is them interacting with each other. The C is them bouncing off of an exterior field, and the D is them bouncing off of the exterior field and interacting with each other.
Oh my gosh! And then look at these in the chat here. Whoops. Oh, nice. Brant's already got. Yeah.
Love the filter.
Love it.
Love the filter.
Love it. That's the duality, living duality over the Dougherty set with the conics in it. But yeah, you can see that's the shape that I'm making here, and a lot of the shape that we've been talking about without even knowing that what the structure was. I was already designing it.
Well, they say imitation is the greatest compliment.
And also, you see this in here is it. This triangle structure right here. If I were to show you more of this and how this nests, that is it. And pine trees, going back to Heather's image here. Look, that's a pine tree.
Yes.
What did I freaking say? It's a freaking pine tree. I knew it from the sound. I must be, in some manners, which I already knew, a synesthete or synesthetic.
Right. It's like it's even leaf structures. The tree is the leaf. It's the same branching.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it in sound as well. And this reminds me of Mikey Bergman's forms with the infinite or infinity theory, how it spirals inwards at a phi ratio, and then it spirals outwards and goes to the smaller loop, and spirals inwards and spirals outwards and goes to the smaller loop.
Yep.
You're
talking about Dan Winter's sculpture, or Mikey Bergman's sculpture in honor of Dan Winter of phi nested waves, which is phase conjugation.
Yeah.
I knew that's what I was hearing was phase conjugation. That's why I knew it was a pine cone or a pine tree. And Heather, will you repeat what D is just so the audience heard you?
That's them interacting with each other after bouncing off of an exterior surface.
That sounds like them pulling up a pine tree, interacting with each other after working with an exterior surface.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. So my intuition's
sure
proven right here on the show.
I'm sure it would make a big difference whether the sound interacted
Great job, Heather.
with glass or an absorbent figure, like spongy mesh.
Absolutely. Like if it was, or if it was taut, or if it had give, right? It was like
Almost
flexible,
like the
or
sound
if it was
itself has tensegrity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another
Hey,
one.
buddy. I
Yeah.
sent a link in the group chat that talks about the Fournier series, and this breaks down sound in a whole nother way.
Oh
It's
boy.
yeah. Here, I'll share it again, so it'll be at the very bottom. Go ahead. It's at the very bottom.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Way to be right on it.
Okay. Now, this video is it's blowing my mind because I'm seeing everything as the Fournier series, or
Yeah, me
or
too.
even a third
I know
dimensional aspect of
this.
it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So the Dougherty set in Fourier series, imagine the solar system in Fourier series with the Dougherty set showing it. The Dougherty, literally, you could make that happen.
Oh,
You know what I
I
mean?
need to do the audio, don't I? Here, let me pull up the audio. And
Check study made a
Well,
huge
it's 20
difference
minutes
in
long. We're not going to
projections.
listen to much audio. We're just going to look at pictures and you explain it.
also, we need to give a shout out to 3 brown, 3 blue, 1 brown.
3 blue, 1 brown.
And
Subscribe to him.
let's see.
Make sure
So
we're
what-
subscribed to him.
channel, yeah.
So what this idea
Let's
is,
Well, this is a different channel. I have like 4 or 5 channels. I'm subscribed on my. So now I'm subscribed to multiple platforms. So don't knock us off here for showing your stuff, bud. We love your stuff. 3 blue, 1 brown. 1 brown, 3 blue. Oh, now brown cow.
okay, could you start at the video from the very beginning?
Sure.
Okay. Actually, start at 30 seconds in. Would be ideal.
Oh. Okay.
When you're ready. Okay,
Yeah.
you're at
Example to
38.
start is going to
Okay.
be the classic one, decomposing frequencies from sound. But after that, I also really, the central example to start is going to be the class
Yeah, we're good.
into
Okay.
many seemingly disparate areas of math and even physics. Really, it is
So-
crazy just how ubiquitous this idea is. Let's dive in. This sound right here is a pure A, 440 beats per second, meaning if you were to measure the air pressure right next to your headphones or your speaker as a function of time, it would oscillate up and down around its usual equilibrium in this wave, making 440 oscillations each second. A lower pitch note, like a D, has the same structure, just fewer beats per second. And when both of them are played at once, what do you think the resulting pressure versus time graph looks like? Well, at any point in time, this pressure difference is going to be the sum of what it would be for each of those notes individually, which, let's face it, is kind of a complicated thing to think about. At some points, the peaks match up with each other, resulting in a really high pressure. At other points, they tend to cancel out. And all in all, what you get is a wave-ish pressure versus time graph that is not a pure sine wave. It's something more complicated. And as you add in other notes, the wave gets more and more complicated. But right now, all it is a combination of 4 pure frequencies. So it seems needlessly complicated given the low amount of information put into it. A microphone recording any sound just picks up on the air pressure at many different points in time. It only sees the final sum. So our central question is going to be how you can take a signal like this and decompose
All right,
it
can you
into
skip
the
to
pure
3 minutes
frequencies that make it
15?
up. Pretty interesting, right? Adding up those signals really mixes them all together. So high points of the graph correspond to a greater distance from the origin, and low points end up closer to the origin. And right now, I'm drawing it in such a way that moving forward 2 seconds in time corresponds to a single rotation around the circle. Our little vector drawing this wound up graph is rotating at half a cycle per second. So this is important. There are 2 different frequencies at play here. There's the frequency of our signal, which goes up and down 3 times per second. And then, separately, there's the frequency with which we're wrapping the graph around the circle, which at the moment is half of a rotation per second. But we can adjust that second frequency however we want. Maybe we want to wrap it around faster.
Okay, now can we skip
or maybe
to
we go and wrap it around slower.
16 minutes
And that choice of
45.
winding frequency determines what the wound up graph looks like. Some of the diagrams that come out of this can be pretty complicated, although they are very pretty. The center of mass stays in the same spot, right? It's just tracing out the same shape. But the longer that signal
Cardioid.
exists, the larger the value of the Fourier transform at that frequency. For other frequencies, though, even if you just increase it by a bit, this is canceled out by the fact that for longer time intervals, you're giving the wound-up graph more of a chance to balance itself around the circle. That is a lot of different moving parts, so let's step back and summarize what we have so far. The Fourier transform of an intensity versus time function, like g of t, is a new function, which doesn't have time as an input, but instead takes in a frequency, what I've been calling the winding frequency. In terms of notation, by the way, the common convention is to call this new function g hat with a little circumflex on top of it. Now, the output of this function is a complex number, some point in the 2D plane that corresponds to the strength of a given frequency in the original signal. The plot that I've been graphing for the Fourier transform is just the real component of that output, the x-coordinate. But you could also graph the imaginary component separately if you wanted a fuller description. And all of this is encapsulated inside that formula that we built up. And out of context, you can imagine how seeing this formula would seem sort of daunting. But if you understand how exponentials correspond...
Could you go
and do
back
the
to
same
8
thing.
minutes real quick?
Wind it around a circle.
Or hold
Imagine
on.
different potential winding frequencies, and as you do
Actually,
that,
9
keep track
minutes.
of where the center of mass of that graph is, and then plot the x-coordinate up or cosine wave. It's something a little
Yeah,
complicated.
perfect.
But imagine throwing this into our winding frequency machine. It is certainly the case that as you wrap this thing around, it looks a lot more complicated. You have this chaos and chaos and chaos and chaos, and then whoop, things seem to line up really nicely at 2 cycles per second. Then as you continue on, it's more chaos and more chaos, more chaos, 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 chaos. Whoop, things nicely align again at 3 cycles per second.
Okay, so what they've done is they've taken on this graph 2 hertz per second and 3 hertz per second and put them together. So this is playing both 2 hertz a second and 3 hertz a second at the same time. And what they've done is they've created a graph to decode what is playing, because the graph is extremely complex when you look at it, and we don't know how to break that down into 2 hertz per second, 3 hertz per second. So they've created this geometric graph to understand and break down what hertz, what frequencies are being played in an audio file. And it will tell you when every frequency is being played, what frequency is being played through this rotational occurrence. And this is effective when studying, for example, stars. If you look at stars out in the distance and they're creating constant frequencies, like a group of stars.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Spectroscopy.
Spectroscopy, yes. You can break down exactly what hertz are being played by what stars. That's why you can say that this star resonates at this frequency.
Yeah, that's
like Cirrus
it's made
is
of this mostly, or made of this, or yeah.
right. And there's all sorts of ways to understand, but again, this is another component to understanding. I'm curious about how the Fourier series breaks into the 3rd dimension and the 4th dimension, if there's ways to understand this kind of geometric representation of frequency in, of course, higher dimensions or other tiling patterns, other frequency formats. If we can get more in depth to understanding the actual shape of sound through understanding it mathematically, like with this graph, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, acoustics and getting into the math and geometry of acoustics and sound. There's so many different directions to take it, but this is definitely a good video. I remember watching this, and we got to remember what the difference is between a Fourier transform and a Fourier series, because they're 2 separate things.
Okay.
Now here's a Fourier transform that you were just showing me, and a Fourier series is this. Fourier series is should I do? Yeah, I can do this.
This is a
one.
great one.
Now, basically, you can. We're going to show a little bit about this and then get into sonification, taking data and turning it into taking data maps and turning it into different things.
Like the fractals that these produce. Here, I can go ahead and pull one up and send it in the group.
This system of spheres, if you can do the solar system in this and a Fourier series using the Dougherty set or the Dougherty network, you can trace what the universe will look like. You can make the universe. You can do, I mean, not universe, you can do the solar system, see, based off of a series of winding circles. You can create anything,
Buddy,
any type of wave.
Go to the group chat. I mean, the chat on...
and the Dougherty set is all circles, so like you could make the biological creatures using these, and these might have a sound to them. The Fourier series, you can make sound? Can you make sound related to it?
It reminds me of what we were talking about, compressing data on how the universe would compress data if we lived in a virtual reality, which would be it would only explain the surfaces, and everything else would be hollow unless observed.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people are doing these Fourier series, fractal, spiral.
There's more down below if you scroll down, yeah.
Fun.
And right,
pentagonal, hexagonal. I guess that's based on how many circles are
inside the set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and to take that idea of virtual reality, to another level, you don't even have to model out the actual surfaces.
Wow.
Only the interaction points.
Right.
In some way. And so like in MMORGs where there's, 100,000 people playing all on the same server, they're not actually modeling out the empty space or the frames of reference until there's actually a perceiver there walking through that game. And in that moment, then the server renders those frames that are appropriate.
Okay.
And time code actually needs to be the same on the quote unquote server, the virtual world, that if someone else walks in there, they're seeing the same, whatever it is, quest or cup or, everything like that. And so it's in the overlapping between two different perceptions and the perceiving of that you actually have to begin modeling out form.
If this reality is a virtual reality...
Look at that tailspin.
We've been given the ability of free will to... and also the lack of meaning. It's not like pulling up a video game and doing a quest. We have no meaning, absolute meaning, other than the delusions that we give ourselves. Nothing solid. We're born into this world and we go, what the hell is this? And we look up at our mother and we go, surely they gave birth to me. They would know, like a goddess, able to educate me. But, and then you grow up into adulthood and you realize that you've never left childhoodness and you still don't have a clue what's going on here.
Do you think animals are concerned with their purpose?
Well, purpose of I need to eat, I need to survive. That's a primitive example of purpose or even plants have purpose, and we all base our purpose on surviving because we don't know what's next, and that's a fear of...
I think there's different questions you could ask, like do they all desire affection or touch?
Good question.
Like what kinds of purpose?
Well, but I wonder because so like my dog is like a working dog, right? Like he's a black lab blue heeler. Both are very work driven. So he is happiest when he's got some job that he's even if any of his job is just sitting on the couch watching a kid, like guarding a kid. But if you give
a work-driven animal and activity to do, they thrive. They have a better health. They have a happier disposition, a longer life, because they are fulfilling their perceived purpose. They're happy to be doing the thing that they're doing.
Right. Meaning is only.
I mean, so to me, that's an extension of purpose and acknowledging that, like self-awareness of that purpose within an animal or outside of humanity. We'll just say that.
Okay.
I'd love to jump in on this. I think you bring up a really good point about the balance between almost life and order and chaos and death. And so in having a purpose, it's like we're organizing the chaos, and we feel good about being an agent of organizing the chaos and bringing meaning, but when we're just subsisting, we tend to degrade into entropy, and that our life force kind of breaks apart and says, okay, this guy isn't doing anything meaningful, we'll just kind of break him down. And so I think you're actually pointing to a great point about meaning, structure, and purpose actually giving life and vitality in some way.
Meaning is a momentary meaning is only momentarily in existence. When we give something meaning, it only exists in a moment, and then when that moment has passed, the meaning does not exist anymore. If we give meaning an infinite moment, it becomes exponential dread. Fear.
But you can heighten.
Death.
But you can heighten the senses with a myriad of things that create novelty to always.
Right, like a context. Because if you put something in a permanent context, it always has that meaning within that context, but you can move outside of that context and give it a different meaning. So I don't think it has to do with as much as like an ephemeral point in time, how long something holds on to its said meaning. I think it has more to do with situationally and circumstantially, and how it is perceived within its
circumstance. It is attachment.
Yes.
Okay. The Buddhists had an interesting saying that attachment causes our sufferance. Perhaps if we let go of meaning, or take this into a perspective of Alan Watts, letting go of our meaning, letting go of our purpose, letting go of our concepts and attachments to what is correct, what is right, how to live life, how to do this, how to do that, we become free, truly free. And in that freedom is strangely a lack of meaning or nothing. It's like to explain something is to, or to label something is to limit its potential. We're all infinite in our monistic, without definition. In the center of who we are, we're all infinite. Everything is infinite. But as soon as we give something meaning, we then have a task or an attachment which can perhaps hold us back from the realization.
There's multiple nested layers, as if it's a liquid, and there's sheathing that goes on. Life is a process, Crystal. It's layering. It's always growing. So that's what helps us to know that there is a history and there is a scaffolding to it, and it is organic and living. And if there is some sort of simulation to it, it has tricked us very much into trying to understand what magnetohydrodynamics is.
Mm-hmm. Does all form have a function, have purpose, have meaning? Does all form give itself a meaning to exist?
Well, see.
It has qualia, but not meaning.
Or an umwelt, like the first trees to exist, arguably, were conifers and the Ginkgo biloba. You know what a Ginkgo biloba is? Look at the Ginkgo biloba leaf right here.
Okay,
Gink-
biloba.
It's the first tree. It's the most ancient, and it's always been medicine since
Right.
since the day one of humankind.
Photo of Ginkgo biloba.
Photo of Ginkgo biloba leaf. Okay, so this is, see the top here? Now I'll show you Ginkgo biloba. But everything is so nested and so many different nests, nested layers that it's too alive and too vortex dynamic driven and liquid and hydrodynamics and magnetohydrodynamic to be. We see that it all comes from the sun. Anybody that wants to try to fake us into thinking that it's a matrix simulation, they've been in a video game too long, or they've been their nose in the book too long. It's not.
Not just metaphorically though, but to a degree we really are, because we're in the lattice matrix. We're a lattice matrix substrate.
Yeah. And neutrinos probably give it its illusion of being.
Hey, buddy, what is that helical structure in plasma when it starts creating helicals that wrap around other helicals tighter and tighter? And it's almost like a fractal of helicals, but it's within itself, it's self-embedded.
I just bought his books, 3 more of them, and they're print on demand. Vladimir B. Ginsburg, and the name of it is Helicola, Helicola, like Helicola.
Through a big horn, right? Can I just say one more thing before we get off the other topic about life is suffering? And because you're talking about Alan Watts, and it makes me think of Buddha, like life is suffering and like the ultimate detachment. So if life is suffering and we cannot escape the matrix that we're in, maybe we are meant to suffer through it. And that ultimate detachment is death. And we can't, even through death, we can't escape the matrix attachment. We're still energetic creatures within it. So I guess that's what it is.
Right.
Yep. When you die, perhaps you become part of the whistlers and the warblers, and the chirps and the chorus and the growlers and the hisslers.
Free electrons floating through the galaxy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gabriel's horn, just like you were
Gabriel's
talking
horn
about at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. And you brought this up about Alan Watts, and what it reminded me of his conversation about the Garden of Eden. That if you're in a unified field, essentially, you don't need to leave that field to then go try to do something within it. You can kind of rest in the buoyancy of the ocean. The second you think you need to swim inside the ocean is the moment that you're going to wind your energy down because you think you have to swim.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
If you choose not to choose, and how this fits on like your conversation about animals, and do they have a purpose or do they suffer for their purpose? They just are.
They're not
trying to be something.
They're having a great time. Totally. There's so many videos of them having a blast, and the necessity of the dangers. The mom teaches them the dangers. The parents teach them. There's oftentimes, it depends on what creature you're talking about. There's millions of billions of different creatures, and why is our gut directly attached with CMEs, coronal mass ejections? It's instantaneously attached to it. But your analogy that you said, like, is life. Okay, yes. You're swimming in the water, or you're just in the water. As soon as you have a hard time in life, you realize the water's there and you have to swim. But you shouldn't be swimming. You should be just kind of flowing and not being afraid of drowning. Because there's so many people that are suicidal right now, and I like to try to help them on every episode, or anybody. Just so, like, anything that we can say to help, them reassure themselves that they're not nuts. And some of the voices that they might hear could be some of these auroral choruses, and don't listen to the bad voices, but
Can you
know.
pull this image up in the group chat?
Which one? Okay,
just
gotcha.
showed it.
Coming in hot. Whoa, that's a shalong. All right, here we go.
So when talking about purpose of form, I do not just I'm not just explaining animals or humans, but I'm saying in plasma, say you have a structure moving outwards and it's doing this spiral, and there starts to be a dissonance and a breakdown, and it starts creating another spiral to make the other spiral maintain equilibrium.
Yes.
What goes on is as soon as a new spiral is formed, each time it has its own purpose, it has its own attachment, it has given itself its own life meaning. That I need to keep this other half in balance, in equilibrium. And so we can perceive, if we were that spiral, that our consciousness, as the spiral itself, our purpose would be to keep the other spiral in form. And I think that, whether it's our tasks, whether it's as strange as looking at spirals in comparison to how we have to do work or have to do this or have to do that in the mundane human life, all tasks and meanings are equally nonsensical, but it's what creates this existence.
It's the paths of least. It's how charge and charge separate or charge distribution, efficient charge distribution. When charge gets built up so much, it creates another helical arm, and more and more and more and more form. And this is also how DNA is properly produced.
Yeah, winds around real tight.
Mm-hmm. And DNA is actually the best way that we know to pack information in the universe.
I'm not sure about that.
DNA, yeah. Look at Google it. I don't think anything's better so far. DNA is the most efficient way. Why do you think life forms exist,
Well, it depends what kind of information you're packing.
Are you questioning God? That's how God chose to do it, man. Everything's DNA.
See, I think some honeycombs might be a better way to pack information. I think that maybe even basic second dimensional. See, this is a third dimensional example of packing information, and it's packing helical information, which is it might have a efficiency of explain.
There's nothing that is not this, Brighton. This is the movement of the Milky Way. This is the movement of a Birkeland current. This is the movement of how everything is. So there's no getting away from this structure.
At a certain level of subatomic physics, that no longer begins to exist. You see, I think this kind of structure is based on a dissonance. Even in equilibrium in the dissonance itself. It tries to seek back the Euclidean frame, as if you could imagine that, straightening out into a singular beam, a singular line. When smaller structures, there's no dissonance in the field that would produce other particle forms saying, hey, I need to keep this other particle form in rotational equilibrium. That doesn't happen in smaller forms. I don't think helicals exist in subatomic physics.
I would beg to differ because the Dougherty set is subatomic, and it's not only it doesn't only explain things on the interstellar galactic plane level, but on the micro scale. And when you get down to the micro scale, it nests helically as well. On the last few episodes, we've been talking about this and how nucleation occurs with helical dynamics of implosion and implosive forces. So I'm totally arguing with you. That's great. So I'm arguing to disagree.
You're saying nuclear fission, where if the particles separate. You're saying something like that could be based on a helical system. where
Absolutely.
it changes its tiling.
I think that we efficiently went through that on one of the episodes of this show. The episode talking about Eric Lerner's model, his plasmoid model of what quasars are and black holes, and the dynamics of them and how they fit inside the Dougherty set and the Dougherty network, and how they're helical. Actually, I have the images in here. Let me, what would be the best way to go through this? Because I don't know where to get them right off the bat.
Scrolling, or you want me to pull up Eric Lerner's model of?
No, I'm almost there.
The universe, the atom, which model do you want me to pull up?
Eric Lerner's model of a quasar.
Let's see.
Man, that was like
My
one of the
textbook
first.
only lets me check answers for odd numbered questions.
Sorry.
Is only half.
This is it right here, Brighton.
I just sent it in the group chat, link
This
to
is
the
it right here.
model. Yeah, the video is in the group chat as well.
Yeah, so that's a helical network as well. And helical binding structures are long-lasting. Nothing explains these.
Well, isn't this just to a black hole?
No,
this is a lot larger than atomic models. You're saying quasar.
Oh yeah. I'm showing the micro and the macro in the same model on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in the Dougherty set. And if both of them show, both the micro and the macro are showing the same nested model. And ultimately, Vladimir Ginsburg, who that's how I showed you this helical structure here. He calls that a helical, and this is his page right here. I'll send that.
Because a quasar is a massive, remote celestial object. It's
absolutely.
So
they work the same.
Examples in subatomic physics, though.
Oh yeah, right here. Here's a plasmoid. This is what he created in the lab. This is a lab-created plasmoid, and this is why we believe that these knots, these helical knots, are on the large scale, because we created them on the micro scale, because they're scalar. They work on, they are able to be scaled up. That's the wonderful thing about plasma.
It's larger, much larger than an atom, is it not?
This right here?
Yeah, much larger than an atom.
How is that being visualized? Is that actual photograph, or how is that being brought in visual representation?
It looks like a plasma beam has been generated and is being shot out, and I guess
creating a plasma knot. Something like that. Something like that's going on.
There's a red one and a blue one. Wouldn't it
That's
be
what he said.
The two of them are mixing and interacting?
Yes, and it's twisted, and everything's twisted. The more twisted it is, the more likely it is the system.
Again, this is a lot larger than subatomics.
This is subatomic right here. It works on the micro and the macro. This is a fusionless, flawless system that shows that the harmonies stack on top of each other using the duality, the living duality set, or the Dougherty network, in the same, but cascading or using projective geometry, the event outward. This explains. There's nothing in the world that explains these jets other than the dynamics of plasma science and electromagnetic plasma physics, and this is how nucleation occurs in the atoms of stars. They say that new atoms and heavy elements are formed in these type of events. Then that's this binding type of event throwing it off. So even at the nucleation level of nucleogenesis, nucleosynthesis, it occurs using the same. It would occur using the same, or seem to occur using the same types of geometry. Where
the vortexual reaction between particles, I can see that. I can see vortexual reaction between particles, between atoms, but not within, say, neutrinos, pardon me, not within really small structures inside the actual particles. It does not make sense that there would be any helical systems keeping them afloat. That they would rather be their own bodies of more Euclidean structures, because they're closer to dynamic or quantum equilibrium. There's less applying forces on smaller structures, meaning that the helical or spiraling fashion happens between two or more particles, not of one particle itself.
This could be one knot.
Seeing this in subatomic physics.
This could be
right.
one
Let me jump in and
bubble.
ask you a question. Because we're talking about microscopic and macroscopic, or even particle and subatomic.
Yeah.
My understanding is, and I just want to ask some basic questions to kind of go back to some of these things. A particle seems to be modeled out by Euclidean geometry, whereas a wave is a wave modeled out by Euclidean, first of all.
Hyperbolic.
Hyperbolic, okay. And subatomic particles, they're not billiard balls at that level, or are they? Are they spherical in terms of their influence? Because they're not a particle yet, like an atom that's bouncing up against another atom. Are they more wave in nature, so they're more hyperbolic?
I think that particles themselves are Euclidean, but the interaction between particles is hyperbolic because it's two or more interactions. It's kind of like if you imagine two, I don't know, floating orbs, and you put them in a coffee cup and you stir those, or two tiny marshmallows, you put them in a coffee cup and you stir it around, the two bodies will spin around each other like a helix. It's if you apply two or more systems, there's a gravity force, a strong weak force that has an interaction, but it has to be two or more systems for it to be helical.
That's the hot becoming cold or the cold becoming hot. Yeah. It doesn't have to have two or more systems. It can be self-referential. A self-referential system can be
helical?
Yes, absolutely.
A singular particle can be helical.
Helical knots and helical braiding. That's what the in knot theory of what waves are is really what it comes down to. Or if you study the quantum loop geometry or quantum loop gravity, loop quantum gravity. Right. It's all about loops and hoops. And I mean, I'm open to ideas, but ultimately I don't think that it's a Euclidean type of structure. There could be fields that hold things in a Euclidean type structure, like platonic solids spinning and creating the different nests of the Birkeland currents, or the different nests of the Bessel functions that create all of the dynamism that we see. Because so far what we're seeing is the scaffolding is like this. This is what everything is created. So far through these episodes, we're seeing this. If you can digitally see this in your head as like some sort of a computer code, like Conway's Game of Life, but using some sort of Fourier series, or...
Can you put this link in the group chat, please?
Copy. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was in one of our last episodes as well. I see there's a lot of self-referential material that we ourselves cover. And when you start studying self-referential knots and looping, you get back into this structure, and it builds up so much charge and so much energy that's what builds an Empyrean, a superhuman being. You see Michael Jordan's right here, but you have to curb that to get here. You have to go just a little bit further. You're the filament that pushes the humankind forward. And then Olympics is all built off of this. And everything is a helical bound winding knot, because all of our time history and all of our space-time geometry and plasmoids and everything is based off of this. This is the basic helicoidal Ricola, the helicola, the Vladimir here. I got to give credit where credit's due. So when I find this stuff, this guy's books are where it's at. And I was just about to sit back with some coffee because I got some time off and get into my nose deep in 3 more books that I got from this gentleman. And I want him on the show. I want to meet him in person. He is self-referential. Everything that he does is all family. He's a closed loop. Like, I'm sure reach out to him. I haven't yet reached out to him and tried, like Rupert Sheldrake. Once I meet Rupert Sheldrake, it needs to happen, these 2 gentlemen. Anyway, so Brighton, you're right. When you pulled it up, I like this kind of outlook, but at the same time, Brighton's right in that it creates a crystalline lattice type of geometric stacking as it moves in a 3D cymatics through the movement. So there could be a crystalline grid that we're moving through that helps create the morphologies of what we're experiencing.
Archimedes screw.
Archimedes screw, another one.
Making me think of Archimedes screw. Well, because it's a pressure gradient that allows you to pull up at a desired consistency. Because I was thinking about this, while we're talking about this, I'm thinking about the shapes and the shape forms, and that because for a long time I thought that the elements were called to by a specific frequency of light, especially when we talk about plants or basically anything else, like the glowing color of the aurora or whatever. And so do specific shapes induce specific currents or call to interact with certain currents in a specific way. And the reason that they flow in this spiraling pattern is because it produces a consistency of pressure, like an Archimedes screw.
Yep, it's the field that creates the form. And we can see this with the vortex of the fish and how they swim through the water. And once again, we're back at the water and life coming out of the water, and possibly from the sounds of the sun, and wanting to manifest from these Birkeland currents that are recursive. And that's how you get jellyfish. That's how you get, these are beginning creatures.
For movement it allows for continuous flow and movement without the need for an upgrade of pressure like a straight line would. You know what I mean? Because it's constantly falling back on itself, and that's pushing it through.
There's a picture of a fish on one of these somewhere, but it's Schauberger's fish. We need to get more back into Schauberger. And yeah, you're right, Heather. These are the currents. Everything is based off of currents, and that's the premise of the children's book series of children's books I'm doing. Is because to break this down to layman's, you got to break it down to kids, and if you can break it down to kids, then the adults will awaken from the children's books that they're reading to the kids. So they're going to see the snake dynamics. They're going to see the fear mongering of snakes, our natural fear of snakes, our perception, how these things came out of intuition, how they're natural. These pictures were drawn in the 1800s when plasma physicists were talking about everything being connected inside of vortices. And Maxwell was very big on his vortex model of the ether, and we share that on almost every single episode. And Brighton, that's right up your alley because that is hexagonal. And when charge is when in our one of our other episodes of lightning, we covered how charge becomes hexagonal, and it nests inside of itself in hexagons. So yes, you're right. It is
Euclidean frame. You just need the apices to understand the rest of the tiling.
Indeed, yes. So it's a nested hexagon snake, and that's what Birkeland currents are, because that's the best way, the most efficient way for them to throw off the current as they spiral. They get these. I'm sure hexagon isn't the only one, but there's different ones that they form. So now you get to start to see the geodesics of Birkeland currents, and that they actually have like a crystalline lattice form to them, not only just a flow, but also structure. And
also these forms, they have, I'm trying to pull up a video at the same time. They have, see, the helical systems, they have maximum and minimum potentials.
Mm-hmm.
And those translate to honeycombs as well. The actual maximum and minimum of the waveform translates into honeycombs or bipyramids that genuflect.
Yes.
You can imagine waveform as, if I can send you something.
Have you seen Ice Age 2 yet?
Actually, I got two things. I also have a model that I had drafted for you on the Dougherty set. But
you
this
shared
is
the screen?
a concept.
Are you sharing your screen?
See.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were sharing your screen or not.
Model. Thought I'd uploaded it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, here.
I don't know if you're sharing your screen. I can't see it.
It's in the, it's the last thing in the group chat.
Okay, here we go. Can you guys see my screen still?
And there's another one in the group chat after this about the Dougherty set and its relation in the spiraling structures, these helical structures. Of course, they have meeting points, these helical structures, where they become less concentrated and more concentrated, kind of like an electron spiraling through neurons. The helix gets tighter and looser, wider and thinner.
Yeah, like the Birkeland current throbbing and pulsating.
The helix, starting at one apex of one of these bipyramids, and it reaches its maximum trough at the expansion of one of these bipyramids, and then it again tightens back to the end. In the group chat, there's another video on the Dougherty set.
Okay.
It's in the Skype group chat. Yes.
Oh, is this a new one?
Right. Let me just put one thought in here.
One other video that I'm throwing into the group chat after this
at some
one.
point.
Now this Dougherty set.
Hang on, let Brant say something.
Right, just if you at some point, if you put this over an
STD, see it right there, right there. At the very center, you'll have the beginning of the helix, and it goes outwards towards that purple ring, and then tightens again into the red ring, and then into the green ring, and it gets tighter or wider.
Yeah, the helix forms along these circles.
Yeah, honeycombs or waves, embedded waves as honeycombs between these waves in our atmosphere. They're all acting as bubbles that apply a certain amount of pressure on one another, when they say that our speech is a sound sphere, I mean, yes, there are components, all these components gather together as frequencies emitting from the center of this, and the center is moving along, and these components are the frequencies that are being projected outwards from it. And this is the Dougherty set diagrammed as a Euclidean frame, but it takes the Euclidean frame of what frequencies are, the maximum and minimum troughs of helical structures. There's one more video in the group chat.
Oh, yeah.
And the sphere expanding model of what these are, which is what this is a video of, it shows how spheres expand as well as how they move. And then, for example, the maximum and minimum troughs are those bipyramids, those green bipyramids. Those bipyramids are the frequency itself, where it peaks and where it troughs. And you can look at this as bipyramidal or birhombic polarization. It's just another way to look at sound. For example, we'll have transversal polarization, which explains sound in a fashion of having two planes that are perpendicular to one another. If you want to go back a video.
Back to the last one.
You have two planes that are perpendicular to one another. Actually, if you could on Google search transversal polarization and pull up an image. Okay. Yeah, it takes two planes that are perpendicular to one another, so 90 degrees. And it measures the peaks and troughs of the wave on both of those planes. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
On those planes, it measures the peak and the trough, and these are, two rectangles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way of measuring a wave. If you could now search up elliptical polarization, which is another way of measuring a wave, which takes the rectangular prism on the outside. So instead of looking at it on the inside, you look at it as more of a cylindrical system. And here's where I'm just explaining the mechanics so people can understand what they just saw in the videos. Elliptical looks at the wave as through the rectangular prism on the outside of it all. Right there, that's perfect. That's a perfect example. Yeah. So there's the wave in elliptical polarization, rectangular prism all the way up.
Well, if you put a
bipyramids that I was referring to in the peaks of those pyramids, if you imagine a bipyramid as having a rhombus, two rhombus planes in the center. Instead of rectangles, they have two rhombus planes. So if you want to go back to transversal polarization, it would be much better. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Now, could you click that image down below on the third one, over one and up one. You're just there. Yeah, bingo. That's wonderful. Up one, yes. Okay. So if you look at the peaks and troughs in rhombus sections, which are elongated squares, instead of looking at it in a system of rectangles that span the whole, the whole rim along, you can measure right where it meets the center of the plane, where the transversal polarization meets. You can measure the peak of the wave, and then you can measure again where it meets the center on one plane. And if you take another rhombus and you turn that 90 degrees and put it transversally, you'll have the wireframe, two rhombus planes transversal. And you just create the triangle frame on the outside of that, and you have rhombuses. I mean, you have bipyramids.
Right. Just because it's triangular doesn't mean that it's...
If you take, for example, Giza, and you put a Giza on the bottom of Giza, like the pyramid Giza in Egypt, you'd have a bipyramid. It's two pyramids put together at the base. And it's just another way to look at sound in a more Euclidean fashion. It breaks it down to its real dynamics. But this goes to show how if we only look at waves at these certain points, the whole field of how waves interact is almost a honeycomb, or it is a Euclidean frame. It is bubbles expanding. It has its own dynamism. It's a whole another way to look at our universe and fields, because the peaks and troughs are the very essence of the wave itself. That is how you define the wave. You cannot define the wave through I'm currently working on a hefty amount of projects, but I think we might be able to throw in a Bright and Buddy show or something.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, guys. Love y'all. Thanks
Night.
for being here. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Special thanks to Dan Winter. I'd like to thank Don Scott, Eugene Bagachov, Wallace Thornhill, David Johnson, Terrence Howard, Laird Scranton, Rupert Sheldrake. Check us out on our other podcasts, The Electric View and The Bright and Buddy Show. I also independently interview artists at the Universal Ones Artist Collective on Buddy Doherty's YouTube channel. The Geometric View is love is watching product, love is watching production. Special thanks to Jim Weninger. Thank you for doing that. Executive producers of the Geometric View are Buddy James and Brighton Cotter. Music is by the acronym Beauty, the acronym BUD, and Abyssal Dionysus is the geometer. That's me and Brighton. Thank you for being here. Catch you next Saturday. Love is watching.